Time doesn't erase murder. It just hides it better. They said the case was closed. They said no one was watching. But someone always is. This is Santana True Crime.
Welcome to Santana True Crime. Tonight, we've got an excellent show for you. I've got Dr. David Hayes and Dr. Brian Santana. The reason why these gentlemen are on the show is to talk about JonBenét Ramsey and how the media affected the case, as well as public opinion. Believe it or not, when I reached out to David, because I know that David does a little bit of everything, I wanted to see if he had any background on this case, and he happened to write a doctoral dissertation on this same subject. So he's the perfect person for it. Dr. Brian Santana happens to be my co-author as well as a college professor, so he's got the academic background. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So, David, since you're the leading expert on this for this talk, let's go back to 1996.
Okay.
The murder happens, and of course, this shocked everyone. I think that's fair to say.
Mm-hmm.
What was the immediate focus in the news during that time?
It's interesting. So just as a quick note, my dissertation wasn't on JonBenét Ramsey per se, but on the process of true crime and how media affects homicide investigation. So deals with a bunch of different
fits right into the narrative.
Fits right in.
Thank you.
I didn't want anyone to get upset that, like, this guy got a PhD.
PhD.
That's not how that works. So at the time, it's we're talking suburbs of Colorado, and it is the 1990s. We are smack dab in the sociocultural American dream. It is a very well-to-do neighborhood. So the fact that there was a horrible crime there to begin with was a little bit shocking. On the ground level, local police were ill prepared for it. They just were. These things didn't happen quite that often there. So and this is memory from this aspect. What the news really kind of latched onto was the tragedy in suburbia. That's really the very first aspect of it. It's like because that was the child was missing. That's the aspect. She hadn't been found yet. The news is starting to pick up. It hadn't gone quite national yet until they found her body in the basement. And then there was a great big larger national push of tragedy in suburbia. So that's kind of that's the first thing we heard.
Yeah, and to remind people, they didn't find her body till I believe 1:30 in the afternoon. I believe I'm correct on that.
There's a whole level of investigative. I don't want to say malfeasance because I don't think anything was intentionally overlooked, but investigative mistakes that happened. So the house was searched, and then when John Ramsey went downstairs, he found his daughter after the police search.
Right. And we talked about this on the last show a little bit. The last show that we did, JonBenét, we focused on the note, but I'll just go ahead and say it, being in law enforcement for close to 20 years, it was absolutely handled inappropriately. Normally with crime scenes, the house should be completely clear. You should be doing a slow, methodical search. And you shouldn't have family members helping you with that search. Like, that's a no-no as well. We also know that they made mistakes, like they didn't do an initial canvass of the neighborhood for witnesses. Right. And we could go on and on and on with this, but you're absolutely right. They did not have a lot of experience with this. One of the lead detectives was like a drugs and vice guy or like an auto theft guy. He was not a homicide investigator. And for those that aren't aware, when you're in a department that has a homicide unit, those guys have special training, and it's unique to homicide, and it's not like a regular detective.
Right. And just as a so we're talking about media as well. During the active investigation, the two lead detectives had books come out about the case to tell you the level of professionalism we're dealing with here.
Yeah, and that's just mind blowing, right?
And it literally blows my mind. They're doing interviews about, really. We'll get into this, of course, but really like throwing the Ramseys under the bus in this speculation, this rampant speculation. But see, this is the hard part, right? There's this idea called the white lab coat theory is the generalized name for it, where someone's going to believe you if you have the right uniform on, or the right air of authority, or the right people have said you're an expert. So they call it the white lab coat because if you're in a commercial and you see someone in a lab coat, you're going to listen to what they say as far as health is concerned because they're like a doctor. But if a detective from this unit investigating this is on a news show saying, "Hey, it's the Ramseys," what are we left with? What do normal everyday people need to think? I mean, that's all they need to think because the experts have told them what to think. That's where it got dangerous.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And, we'll get into this more, but that went on for decades. And I think that I remember one of the other focuses during that time period when it first happened was seeing these images of JonBenét being in a pageant. And
Right.
that seemed to be a big push in the media that, it made it appear very inappropriate and
Right.
sexual
It
when
was on purpose though. So one of
yes,
Geraldo's guests, so we'll probably talk about Geraldo in detail because that Geraldo episode where they featured the case did so much damage. They showed a clip of JonBenét just as a pageant performing with a saxophone, and of course, it's what pageant people do. And the another expert on there, a child abuse expert. I'm using air quotes for those of you just listening. And this child abuse expert said that obviously from this video clip they showed that JonBenét was forced to sexualize the saxophone in her performance. And you're like, what is happening? Now this is going out to millions and millions of people who aren't child abuse experts, who and these are Americans, and if it bleeds, it leads. Through the '90s up until today, and so this nefarious sort of cloud builds up with one so-called expert saying that this performance is sexualized. The little girl sexualized with a saxophone, and if you watch it, it's not. She's miming playing a saxophone and dancing. It's a pageant dance,
right.
and it just
Mhm.
it did so much irreparable damage, so much.
Yeah, she's basically rocking back and forth
Right,
like she's
right.
dancing with a saxophone.
I think even the experts said masturbatory
Yes.
in there when they were talking about it. And so this is really the hard part about all of this too. The average human doesn't have experiences, right? They don't we don't have experience. Like all of us have an opinion on Israel right now, for example, but very few of us have been there. So we don't have any of this real world experience. What we have is what we're being shown, what we think we know, and what we're getting from trusted truth tellers. And George Gerbner in the '70s did a study called the cultivation theory, where we cultivate our knowledge of the world without real world experience based on the media around us. And so someone without any real world experience is going to accept the narrative that they're given. Like in my dissertation, it was about serial murder. Most police officers aren't trained to find serial predators. They're just not. So I wanted to know, like, are they affected by true crime as well? And the study I did with the homicide detectives is, yeah, they're totally affected. They have the same stereotypes, the same, they believe in the same truths and myth truths about serial predators. So why wouldn't the average, normal, everyday human just believe what they're told? Because we're talking 1990s here. We're in the 20th century. If it's on TV, it's real, right? It was the truth.
Right.
It's post Walter Cronkite.
So I have a question. So we're talking essentially about two competing authorities then, because on one hand, when you describe the kind of white lab coat kind of theory, I think is the way you
Mhm.
described it. So
Yep.
we have these investigators, whether they have that experience or not, we're giving them initially the benefit of the doubt because they look official. They're wearing a badge. They're in front of the
Right.
camera. But then we also have the media that is, and maybe the media goes along with that story initially
That was it.
giving them that platform. Is there a point in time though where the media, in this particular case that you know of at least, where the media starts to become skeptical of just kind of going along with whatever the law enforcement is saying in front of the camera and starts to kind of take back some of that narrative authority where they're kind of putting forth something that might be a little different or even questioning the competence of the investigators?
So here's the weird thing about media. Um, they don't drive a narrative. They respond to what we want to see because it's all about ratings. When the Reagan administration took out the fairness doctrine way back in the day, so news became news with a Z, and you didn't have to be fair and balanced to call yourself news. But now, and we see this right in 2025, 26. I'm sorry, what are we 8 days in? And we see this now, and it's not they're they're not driving anything. They're really more reactionary than anything. So a really good story comes their way. A lead detective says
Mhm.
it's the parents. They're not going to fight that. There's money in it being the parents. There's so many ratings involved in it being the parents. There's so much money involved in it. I'm going to find my own child abuse experts and psychotherapists and whoever else I can trot out and say, repeat the same things, even more lurid to get me some more views as opposed to some other, program. So I don't think the media is complicit, of course, but I don't think they ever drove a narrative. If they saw an opportunity, they take it, but they don't
Mhm.
they're not savvy enough to create narratives.
Mhm.
So there's a theory about those. So Gerbner did the
Mhm.
cultivation theory. It's called agenda setting. So in the agenda setting theory of communications, media doesn't tell you what to think; they just tell you what to think about. So through volume and repetition, they're going to get you to think about a thing. So if you live in Maine, for example, Mexican border crossers aren't ever going to happen to you. They're not. You're not going to have anyone cross the border in Mexico because you're way up in Maine. But if it's on the news all the time and it's always in the cycle and it's always in your algorithm and it's popping up all the time, it's what you're going to think about. You'll make up your own mind based off of other factors and context that's coming into you. But what to think about is all wrapped up in there.
Yeah, and that makes complete sense. And with this, I feel like it was a constant barrage of the family did it
Yeah,
just in different media forms. I think that at first it was kind of this inside job, and then the parents lawyered up. They got a PR person.
they did
Uh,
not make good moves.
yeah, and I felt like that that narrative just got, even emphasized even more that look,
Right.
why would you need a lawyer? Why would you need a PR person? Why aren't you talking with the police?
Right. And so I mean they were too. And that's the interesting part as well. They didn't do interviews out in the world. That first interview they did back was a very strange thing. Very uh, felt deliberate and it didn't feel natural. But again, so what we do too as humans is we make these fundamental attribution errors where we attribute behavior to people that we based on our context that we think. So John Ramsey didn't cry enough. Patty Ramsey cried too much. You know, like this is whatever we think we would do in that instance. We're going to push onto them and make these faulty attributes. So um, all of these there wasn't any one thing either. It's the local police narrative, the fact that there was some mistakes in the investigation and the young girl's body was found after a search by the father. So immediately you went to, well, he placed her there. Like, well, of course he didn't place her there. My gosh, come on, work with me, people. This is not how logically this can go down like that. The note in and of itself is a super interesting aspect of it. I have theories on the note, but we can talk about that later. It's because I know you guys just talked about it, but
You know what? Go ahead. We'll work it in.
okay. So my theory on the note, for those catching up, there was a ransom note. Of course, the JonBenét was dead at that point by the time the note was written, and it had a couple of references in it that were very specific to the Ramsey family. But I deal a lot with what's called the criminal humanities, and that's like artistic interpretation of criminal behavior, and then criminals um, giving their artistic interpretation of things. So, like how a mass murderer would write, for example, what kind of stories they would tell. So, really, it's the humanities wrapped up in a crime. And if you read that note, it doesn't read. It's very long too. It's a very very
Right.
long ransom note.
It's a letter.
Yeah,
Right.
it's advocating for things.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can't imagine anyone writing, like just sitting there and writing that with someone about to be kidnapped, or you had just killed your child and sitting down like, well, let's do the letter part now. And this is this long, really coherent letter. The letter reads like someone um watched a bunch of movies and they thought that's how a ransom note should sound. I mean, it's really kind of the point. And then this kind of ties into who I think, is responsible for this anyway. But the very specific things in the ransom note, the bonus that John Ramsey got, the exact amount of the dollar amounts and all these things, could easily have been overheard by someone who had secretly embedded themselves in the house for just a few, maybe a day. One of the pageant stalkers, for example, that could have just been in the house stalking the entire time, hidden away, heard these things, devised the note. It's far more feasible that someone targeted JonBenét specifically from that pageant circuit, the many creeps that are involved in that, than it is the family doing it and writing this long elaborate note, because it really does read from a thematic standpoint like someone wrote a ransom note because they thought ransom notes sound like that.
Yeah, we had Julia Cali on the show last time to talk about it, and she's a former FBI behavioral analysis unit member and has a show, The Consult. Great show, by the way. And her take on it, which I agree, is when you look at the note, it's really focused more on John than it
Yeah.
is on JonBenét. And so I think that there's a connection to John in this, and the letter really was about hurting John as more than it was of anything else. And I know that people have argued with that it was a way to buy time or throw them off, but I I don't see that.
No, it's too labored.
Right.
It's a piece of art. It's a short story, and it took a considerable amount of time to craft.
Well, that's
And that's go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say that was always my thing with the letter, is that it's this kind of pastiche of these different like things, a mosaic of these different movie quotes and references and other things that are there. And it's hard to be able to understand without, having more information about potential suspects they were looking at. But it was, it almost seemed, I've wondered whether it was like a parody. Is it like meant to be read as satire, where it's a satire of a ransom note, or is it, or something else? Because it does feel like it's, yeah, it's targeted towards John Ramsey, like Cameron and Julia had stressed, but it also seems very carefully constructed. But the point of the construction itself, like, is it just like an indirect, passive way to kind of engage John Ramsey, or is this about like, or is this like a satire of the idea of ransom notes, where we're meant to pick up on the movie references and other things that are there, where it's part of the kind of joke that people were spending time reading this note very carefully. I don't know.
I think I think the idea of its satire might be too nefarious. That's supervillain level. I'm going to write a satirical note to throw them.
Yeah.
That's, most criminals aren't Lex Luthor. I think that they probably intended to kidnap JonBenét,
Mhm.
and in the struggle, or overcome with the throes of passion, they couldn't wait, and the basement was where she expired, probably
I
inadvertently.
I think more is I think it's just the diehard bit is what I get stuck on, and putting in a direct reference to other people who are basically engaging in an act of kind of misdirection for a different crime that they're really like the way that fits into kind of what's happening here. Even that is a potential like act of misdirection itself with the letter. It just feels like it's like a postmodern kind of work of art in a way. It's like it's a very kind of strange letter
Right.
to know exactly how you're supposed to what is your correct framework to actually interpret it, you know?
Right. So,
Well,
but
and
if the child is gone, then we know the
Right.
exact framework to interpret it. But I think that like being hidden in the basement.
Mhm.
I mean, that indicates to me that something went wrong, because I mean there
Mhm.
was of course the taser burns and all those things involved
Mhm.
with her autopsy. So
Mhm.
something went awry, and I think the note was probably there to be a note, a ham-handed note
Mhm. Yeah,
for
right.
ransom, but
well,
a note
and
at the
another way to kind of think about it that Julia brought up, and not to go down this rabbit hole for too long, but it is a very interesting topic, is that this is even more sickening, that the reason that he wrote the note, um, that he had no intention of actually doing a kidnapping. The reason that she brought up was that that's a way to continue the fantasy and the hurt of John.
100%. Yeah, that could 100% be, or
Like,
Patsy
I'd
too.
never thought about it until she brought that up, and I said, that is one of the sickest things you can do. But at the same time, when you go back and you look at serial killers, uh, Julia was the lead on the Golden State Killer case, where D'Angelo would pick houses intentionally with men in them
Hmm.
and do things like stack dishes on them while he's,
Yep.
assaulting the person's wife and eventually murdering them. And the whole, experience was to create fear and continue that kind of. I'm trying not to get kicked off
Right.
YouTube with how I'm
Right.
describing this, but to kind of continue that process and making it last longer. And
Yeah.
you
And
think about
relive it later too.
yeah, he dragged that the murder of JonBenét out, and the assault.
Mhm.
And that was, and it's sad to say that I do not believe that happened quickly. And
No, probably not. That could
yes,
also the idea of a pageant stalker too. So this person's coveting something that John Ramsey has. It's his daughter, of course, but he wants to own, possess this particular um, piece of it. So, of course, there's going to be resentment to John Ramsey and Patsy Ramsey. If they have something you want and you can't have it, yeah, they're going to
yeah.
want to pay for it. Okay, quote unquote.
But let's get back on track here.
Yeah, sorry.
I like going down rabbit holes. And, but we can bring that up as far as when the media is releasing these points about the ransom note. I remember one of the points that they made too was that there was no footprints in the snow, even though if you look at later pictures, the reason why there wasn't footprints in the snow is because there wasn't snow on the ground.
Right. So
That's kind of
but where does the media get their information? That's our thing. It's going to come from the top. Now, and the top mean like the investigators, or someone's leaking it, or they've got the camera outside there. So I don't think they're creating. They're not creating the narrative. They're absolutely profiting off whatever narrative is being handed to them, and choosing what to report and what not to report. That's a very distinct part of it. So like they're culpable by exclusion as well, by not telling the story of everything. But there's no impetus the way broadcast media at the time, and even now, was set up for them to actively counter a narrative that's paying them money,
right.
which
Well,
is
and
sad.
speaking
It's
about
sad.
In thinking about this block of media as we're describing it, since you brought up the broadcast media, during the time with JonBenét, is there any meaningful distinction at all between how the print media versus broadcast media are covering the story, or are they largely kind of falling into the same kind of narrative together?
So I'm not sure. In 1996, I'm in my 20s, so me and print media not actually acquainted very well.
Yeah.
But I will know that there's distinctly different audiences
Mhm.
for someone who reads the newspaper every day in 1995 and a Geraldo,
Yeah.
the average Geraldo viewer.
Sure. So the New York Times versus the whatever, yeah.
All right. So Abby
Versus
said,
versus
who,
versus yeah, whoever.
not to
It was all
interrupt
the
you,
same.
but Abby is involved in media and she remembers it all being the same. So
It
thank you
very
for
well
that.
could be. Yeah, thank you, Abby.
Yeah, yeah. I was
And
just curious.
if there was any distinction, I think it would probably be, at the time it would be your Atlantics and your New Yorkers and things that wouldn't be afraid of a backlash, a populist backlash, because at the time, I mean, I remember my parents highly invested in this, avid news watchers, and they were all anti parents at that one. Like, they did it, of course they did it. Who else did it? Like you have they told you about a note and some footprints and what you've come to this conclusion about the fate of someone. Okay, then let's carry on.
Yeah. And I feel like that things just escalated when, like during the Geraldo episode,
Oh,
which is one of my favorites,
it's vile. I mean,
just of how
from a
bad it
ethical
is. I want to be
standpoint,
clear
it
on
is
that.
vile.
Yes, where for those that have not seen it, I tried to find it on YouTube. I think it's been removed because Geraldo got sued for this, but they had a mock trial where they had experts come on for each side, and it was
Right.
very Jerry Springer-ish. If for those that are old enough to remember Jerry Springer, where the whole idea was just to, you know, drum up the crowd. And
Was yep.
yes, but
What
it
and for
was
those too young to remember Geraldo Rivera, it might be good to give some context for for people that are watching now that were too young to watch Geraldo Rivera in his heyday on talk show. Maybe some context about like what was the Geraldo show like? How might you explain it to someone prior to this incident?
So I would say the Geraldo show was a daytime talk show, and these were interview shows that they would have all the time, and they would bring guests on. They would be volatile topics. They would be some very sensitive topics that they would handle in the most insensitive ways, and there would routinely be guests fighting one another on these types of shows. They would bring in, for example, I remember one Jerry Springer that was incredibly famous where they brought in a group of Black Panthers and a group of Klan members to have a discussion.
yes, I actually remember that one.
What's going to happen?
Right.
They knew full well what was going to happen, so they wanted it to happen because that's ratings. And so Geraldo was less vitriolic than Jerry Springer. I think Jerry Springer kind of is the final form of the daytime talk show, and when it went into its final resting place. But Geraldo was a very prominent and well respected news person. And in his earlier career, he broke the scandal on some very the Al Capone's vault. That wasn't quite that popular then, but he did put a spotlight on some very terrible things going on in mental health institutions in New Jersey, I believe, and got a lot of reform happening. And then we get into this idea of the Al Capone's vaults and the sensationalism of it. It really was the tabloid news on TV.
I remember some episodes during this era where it would be you would have two gentlemen on the stage, and then the woman would come out, and it would be who's the baby daddy, and like he would be the one that reveals the results. And of course it's gonna be like F you, I
Yeah.
told you I wasn't the. And then yeah, things just erupt. And That was
Sally Jesse
entertainment during the
Raphael was that
90s.
one of those people. They really the decline of the daytime television show kind of started before Springer kind of took over. It was on its way out because of the Sally Jesse. It was no, not Sally Jesse Raphael. One of the shows where they had a secret lover reveal, and one a guy came out and his secret lover was his best friend, another male, and he had no idea that his best friend was gay, and so this just started this entire uh, collusion of events wherein the guy that had the crush was murdered by the guy that was the crushee, and I cannot remember the name of the show. Someone watching will know.
Was it Jenny Jones or
Jenny Jones, that was it. Yeah, Jenny Jones.
yeah.
And then that show effectively over, and all of them should have been at that point because they had no qualms about any of this. So like would if the news isn't going to fight back on a narrative that's obviously just salacious, of course Geraldo's not. He's going to just feed in and make it even worse. And like in this episode, the experts they called fed this fire that absolutely vilified John and Patsy Ramsey. I'm surprised that they didn't have direct threats on their lives, physical threats. I know they got letters and things like that, of course. It's America.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm glad that they got sued for. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the price tag was for that, but I'm sure that was not cheap. I believe they settled out of court, if I remember correctly, but still, something like that where you're clearly just making a complete show about it, and there's you're not using factual information in this. You're just dragging someone's name through the mud.
And I guarantee the payout was far less than the money they made on the episode.
Yeah, and how do you go ahead, Brian?
No, I was just going to say, I've never seen this episode. What was the actual format of this episode? So I hear you like people were being called as witnesses and stuff. For people that Cameron says not available easily on there, like, was this done like an actual kind of mock trial? And if so, like, what was the kind of setup for the episode? We get the kind of premise, but what did they do?
If I remember correctly, there's the regular stage, so it wasn't as if there was a judge and anything like. If I remember right, because I did watch this, and in the clips that I've seen subsequently, they would have their experts testify. So they would show a clip of JonBenét Ramsey dancing, of course, and then the child abuse expert would say, of course, there's child abuse here. This is a sexualized dance she's forced into. Just absolute nonsense, of course. But it wasn't presented in terms of a trial. I think that's probably more a direct effect of most people just not having any idea how a trial works. That's something that vast majority of people won't even ever be involved with.
And this is occurring during the era in the 90s. If we think about where we are having televised trials, we have divorce court and the people's court with Judge Wapner. There was a whole litany of shows where the idea, at least, or the performance of a trial was becoming kind of collapsed with entertainment as like a show too, watching people go through these different civil disputes and stuff.
Right. So at that point, we get to this idea of behavior and looking at different people. The rise of the true crime and watching court TV and seeing people on their absolute worst day. We go all the way back to like Aristotle and the idea of the cathartic response, right? Wherein, oh look, this person is on trial for their life. Whew, that's not me. I'm feeling good about it. This is pure entertainment, as well as look at how terrible this person is. They're getting exactly what they deserve. I'm glad I'm not them. And we have these cathartic responses for seeing this happen. And then as we start to paint this as more as entertainment, the actual real people involved turn into characters. Then I don't see how like John Ramsey wouldn't be viewed as just a TV, like a bad TV dad, like the Bryan Cranston Breaking Bad dad of the 1990s by most people, because this murder doesn't affect them. Violent crime affects less than 1% of people in the country, period. So they don't have any concept of it. They don't interact with law enforcement unless their neighbor's a cop, and then they'll just barbecue with them. So they don't really have this involvement. So what they see here the same place that gave us Sanford and Son and Leave It to Beaver and the Ramsey family. So they're equitable in the sphere at this point.
That's really interesting. So I wanted to transition a little bit to around 1998. Lou Smith, who is a veteran homicide investigator, he's brought in by the Boulder DA's office to re-examine the case.
Right.
And at first he suspects the Ramseys, but then after he actually reviews the case himself, he does not think that they are responsible.
Right.
Can we talk about that shift and how that played out in the media?
It didn't. Like Lou Smith was ignored because he came up with tons of evidence that just not so no one remembers.
And that was my recollection, but I wasn't sure about that because I did not think until his book came out, really, and Netflix got a hold of it until
Right.
it really got popular. Which, you know, I've got his book right here, Lou and JonBenét, and Netflix picked it up. It's actually done by Wild Blue, which is the same publishing company as our book. But
A Murder on Campus.
yes,
Available at bookstores everywhere.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm not here to get
If
you.
you
plugged.
like Lou's book, pick up our book. It was it's equally as good, and waiting for we'll receive the same reception from Netflix as well if they were to pick this up for a series.
I think the
I
last
do
thing
have
Lou said
both
before
linked in the comments, by the way, if anyone wants to pick up that book. But that was my memory too, is I feel like we've spent decades going after the family, and it was like, okay, the parents did it. And then we've talked about everything from regular people examining her handwriting or what was reported as her handwriting and the note and making their own inferences.
There's a really important thing that happens in the middle of this, though, right
Go
around
ahead.
1998. It's called the internet. And so pre-internet, we were relying on Geraldo, the news, and the New York Times, court TV, and whatever else is happening there. The internet happens. So now everyone has a voice. And the beginning of the internet is even the beginning of the armchair, what do we call them? Net detectives, net sleuths. And so that's even started then. So the preponderance of thought, not the preponderance of evidence, of course, but the preponderance of thought at that point was it's a family issue. The family did it, family did it, family did it. And it's kind of relegated to media at that point. Media, and when the internet happens, is given to the world now. And so everyone is the media at this point. Every single human being is the media right now. And it started then. So now whatever idea was big then is just going to flow. Whatever gets the most press. Lou Smith comes out with a book at a time when people are stopping reading books. I've got all this wonderful information. I've got all this brand new information. Boring. We already know it's the parents. So we're going to go over here in this wild west of unregulated information.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the bad thing about these cases is when you think about the decades that have been spent reinforcing one theory and just having confirmation bias, I guess would be the best way to explain it.
That's it, 100%.
Right. And so for those that don't know what I'm talking about, you're spending all your time picking out facts that support your theory and not looking at the totality of the evidence. So you're not looking at the fact that there's 9 doors in the house, there's multiple keys that were given out that they couldn't even track, that there's unknown DNA on JonBenét, that the crime itself does not, the manner in which she was killed, I don't think would reflect a domestic relationship.
No.
You've got the note that people are saying is, written by someone other than the parents, to include 4 handwriting experts, and people ignore all of that
A
because
similar
they,
break-in a couple of months earlier down the street.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we can go on and on and on about it, and all that's just kind of ignored. And
Right.
instead, it's like, oh, well, the brother did it. Oh, well,
So,
mom did it.
in defense of the internet users, that confirmation bias is from the original investigating officers is what got us into this in the first place.
Right. And, you know, and I think another big moment in this too, with the media and the investigating officers, was during the whole grand jury when that happened.
Right.
I think as soon as that happened, that really confirmed people's theory of, oh, you know what? There's I believe it was supposed to be a secret grand jury,
I think so, yes.
but that got leaked. Regardless, there was a grand jury.
More air
Yes,
quotes with leaking.
right. Oh, we're so embarrassed it got out. Right.
Can't believe that we're going to put these Ramseys in prison forever with this information leaked out that someone did.
Yeah, and I mean, luckily for everyone, they didn't take this to trial, because I think it would have gotten embarrassing if the Ramseys
Oh
did have
yeah.
a,
I mean,
you
I
know,
don't think it would ever go to the Ramseys would never go to trial. I don't think, because I mean, just even how much of the grand jury was to placate an angry mob too.
right.
You know, just to get like, look, we did the grand jury and the grand jury didn't indict. See, let it go. But you know, there's lots of things happen. So the way people view the Ramseys, there's so much at play here. It's not just, you know, these people didn't cry enough, for example, they didn't grieve enough. A vast majority of the country has no idea what someone with that kind of wealth, how they behave. So multiple keys, multiple doors, all these things just are they're just foreign to them. So it's adding onto the levels of alienness that John and Patsy Ramsey have. And then we add into the pageant culture. If you talk to anyone in the South growing up with means, the pageant culture is the verifiable culture of things you do. You have a little girl, that little girl's going into pageants. This is what we do in Georgia and of these families of means. It's what happens. So that being so incredibly alien to most of America as well is another thing that really just added fuel to this fire of the malfeasance and the abuse from the Ramseys, the quote unquote abuse, of course, leading to this, which, of course, you know, if someone's going to do that to their child, of course they could kill them, not realizing that this is you know, a Southern cultural affectation. This is a culture divide, not a criminal activity.
Yeah, and the pageantry stuff reminded me of enrolling your kid in like dance. You know, I
Yeah,
mean, they're
just
running around
intense.
in tutus, and I mean, you're performing in front of the parents. This
Hmm.
isn't a, you know, a large scale thing. But as far as the types of clothing that was worn during those, I don't think that, you know, a kid wearing like a tight leotard is any different than, you know, dressing them up in a dress and dancing around.
Yeah, I mean, it's not unique to JonBenét either. It just it's a definite, and it's very competitive. So that's part of the culture, being a very competitive nature of it. Winning these pageants and placing in these pageants is something that you know, the Southern families of means really got into. And again, it's so foreign to the rest of us. You know, it's like when we see images from, you know, Uruguay, and there's some tribal things happening. We're like, those heathens, look how pathetic they are. Our way is the right way, because that's what we do. You know, when we make these, it's back to our confirmation bias, to our fundamental attribution errors. We don't take culture and context into account. I think that, you know, in my theory of what happened, that pageant culture probably led to this, because it puts these, you know, small children in front of potential predators. And just like the case that was a couple miles away from the JonBenét home, that little girl for that break-in was in the same dance class. So, you know, there's lurkers and stalkers and all kinds of creeps out there. But we even before the internet, now we can just find them easier. But yeah, it's just varying levels of sociocultural alienness to the rest of red meat America that kind of added the fuel to the fire. So we've got the Geraldo, we've got the news reporting these things, the strange happenings at the house. Cops are out there saying that the parents did it. The cops that are investigating are saying this, and even today, if the lead investigator of a case of the Cameron and Brian murder case comes out in news and says, all right, Cameron and Brian did it, we're going to believe them. Whether you did
Right.
it or not is immaterial. Everyone's going to believe that lead investigator. And so, that set the thing, and then media picks up on it and they start to roll with it because it's money at this point. This is American weirdness. We have freaks and geeks. We're going to put them on display, and they roll with it. And it picked up so much steam that there was no turning the ship. It was so huge. The Ramseys were money makers, not for themselves, of course, but
Oh yeah, they were on every tabloid and
you
newspaper
can't turn
for
that ship. And then the
decades.
internet happens, and all the stuff, this huge, this cottage industry of criminal activity now is disseminated individually, since everyone is their own station, everyone's their own reporter, everyone is sharing to their own audience at this point, and it's off to the races.
I want to jump to around 2006 when Patsy Ramsey died. She had cancer. She
Yep.
recovered for a portion of her life, and then the cancer came back, and um, it was terminal. So she eventually passed away in 2006. Does the media let up during that time, or does the narrative start to change?
I think by 2006, if I remember correctly, this was in a cyclical pattern. So it would be like every 5 years or so, we would bring the JonBenét cold case up. It was really like one of the only cold cases getting, outside of Jack the Ripper, getting any play. And it would be anniversaries of it. 2020 investigates, going back to the JonBenét Ramsey case. And I don't think that it was until in was this 2010 or 11 when Bert was under suspicion.
I believe that was before, because in 2008 is
Okay.
when the Boulder Police Department publicly cleared the Ramsey family based on DNA. What if you're referring to when CBS did the story
Right.
on uh, Burke and they
Yes.
accused him of doing it, and then they got sued as well? Yeah, that was earlier.
Okay.
But yeah, that's another kind of
It's in the cycle though. Every few
right.
years we're gonna bring it back up, but we need a new angle. Well, there's the kid. All right, it's the kid.
And people still talk about that. If you get
Yeah.
on these Facebook forums, which I've jumped on, and they are interesting, you'll see people just stuck on these ideas of it was Patsy. And it's not just it's Patsy, it's you're so stupid, it's Patsy, you're a
Right.
moron, it's Burke. Um,
Right.
and it reminds me of Karen Reed, where it's very a clear divide of like, you're either pro Karen Reed and wearing your pink t-shirt, or you are walking down the street with a gallows in your hand and just ready to hang her. And
Right.
there's not a lot of in between. It's not like, well, you know what, she could have been drunk and hit him and not knowing it and whatnot, or there's all these other things. I think it's
Right.
the same way with JonBenét, where it's like, is it possible that the parents did it? Sure. Is it possible that an intruder did it? Yeah, there's a lot of
Yep.
stuff that's pointing towards an intruder.
Right. I think the hard part with the Facebook groups and the modern media is we're back to this idea of the internet again, and how everyone is media. So if we go to the idea that every single, like you, me, Ryan, everyone, we're media in and of ourselves. And if you're arguing in a Facebook group, then you're 100% assured of your correctness because you have the illusion of a voice. And it's the illusion of this voice that, a voice that matters in the world, that drives these hard divides. So, we get to these points where, and we see it politically right now. We see it in sports teams. We've done a really good job of taking real life tragedies that we'll never ever experience, mesh them with the illusion of the voice we have, and use these real life tragedies like they're sports teams. And we cheer on one political side over the other. We cheer when one political side kills somebody else. There's a divide. Like, murder can't be bad. Well, it can be justified or it can be not justified. It's since it doesn't happen to us, and we feel like we've got this voice in the world, we're going to proselytize now, give our media take on it, and it's pure entertainment.
What
And
do you think?
that's the hard part.
What do you think with the JonBenét case in particular? I'm just wondering, because if we're thinking about media and we're thinking about why people in these groups to this day are deeply invested in this case, I can think about some of the other prominent cases over the last 30 years. Think of O.J. Simpson, a case everybody kind of is familiar with. And you can kind of understand the way that that trial and investigation gets wrapped up in these, debates about kind of racial discourse and police and all of these things that are happening at the time. And it does create this very kind of tribal, kind of picking sides kind of mentality that at least we can look to kind of culture and have a sense of exactly how this is intersecting with lots of different things. What is that for JonBenét, do you think, is a case? It's one we continue to kind of go back to, and presumably because we kind of and people feel so invested, it says something about who they are or the way that they want to see the world or something they want to hold as true. Like, what do you think that is for people with this case?
So I think, like, when people are focused on the parents, they need it. So if we go all the way back, this hit cultural zeitgeist, American zeitgeist, because it was an attractive, young, white, well-to-do blonde girl. That's the only reason this was big news. If it happened in, south side of Chicago, no one cared.
Right.
It happened in a trailer park, no one cared. I'm sure it did. I'm sure it happened multiple times just down the street, in whatever, near Boulder, but no one cared. But it happened here. It happened where the rest of the world thinks that, like, this is a little difficult to explain, but I think a vast majority of America aspires to be where the Ramseys are. If I work hard or I win the lottery or I do the thing, I'm going to get the house. I'm going to get the things. I'm going to get the kids. White America, that is, aspires. And so seeing tragedy happen there was shocking because it's not supposed to. That interrupts, the world as like it should be. Like I know the world should be. And so if that can happen there, it can't be anything outside of these awful people have done it. No one could get in there because that's what I aspire to. That's my safe. That's where we're going to be safe when we finally get there. But if there's evil there, then that's not, that's, my worldview is shot. And we start to talk worldview, and it's like a religion. And when your worldview is shot, and then at this point, most American adults have such an issue being wrong about anything that we don't back down on anything, even given counter evidence. So we're left with these ideas.
Yeah, and I think that goes on both sides because the people, and I'll just put this out there that I believe it was 2012 to 2020 is when the whole like Lou and JonBenét book / documentaries start coming out. And there's definitely a camp of pro Lou, and I agree with a lot of things they says, but one of the things that I do not agree with is that a stun gun renders you unconscious. I brought that up in one of the chats. I was like, hey, you know what? I'm a taser instructor, or used to be a taser instructor for over 10 years. I've been tased. They call it drive stun, where it's like pressed up against your leg and shot. It does not, it hurts really bad. It doesn't knock you out. You're going to scream. So it's kind of the opposite of the idea of using a stun gun on her in the bed and then carrying her downstairs. Like, I did not agree with that narrative. So I bring that up, and you would
Right.
think that it was like, oh, a traitor is
How dare
among
you?
us. Yes. And, you know, I think some people were receptive and they appreciated the input, but you're exactly right that it's like a religion. You know, it's you are not allowed to deviate from pro Lou or pro parents. You know,
Because it's
you've
sports
got to be
now.
on, yeah, you've got to be on one or the other.
It's a sporting event because
Yeah.
it's not real to them. It's entertainment.
Yeah.
When it
It's like
makes
when
it
you're
makes you
rooting for your
wonder.
team.
It makes you wonder, even if there was resolution in this case, in the sense that, let's say, as the FBI continues to do, or the police department, I'm sorry, continues to do kind of one-to-one DNA testing, so they get a match, and they do have someone revealed, and it's someone that wasn't really on a lot of these documentaries or news coverage or kind of discussions. I wonder if, like the Richard Allen case with the Delphi, you know, he's been convicted. The evidence is overwhelming. There's no question he's responsible, right? And there's still a large contingent of people who believe that he's innocent that are out there.
Mhm.
And I do wonder if this JonBenét story similarly would also continue, even if we were to show, oh, there's this one-to-one match with DNA. That doesn't necessarily bring resolution and closure to this story, right?
I think so. I think there's a caveat in terms of these types of things with DNA too. That because we've been told, again by the same experts, you know, for years in the white lab code, that this is incontrovertible proof.
Mhm.
This is the one in the billion. So I think a lot of people would turn that way.
Mhm.
But quite frankly, the people that are interested in the JonBenét case, for the most part, we're getting old and dying, and pretty soon we're going to have no one except for, you know, some weird Gen Z internet freaks who who just love studying old cold cases. And but you know, it'll, like everything else, it'll pass through.
Mhm.
I mean, we just had like the Jack the Ripper scarf, for example. And if you've ever, I know this is not an equitable case, but if you've ever gone to ripperologist.com, it is the worldwide Jack the Ripper investigative site with hundreds of thousands of people, ideas, and coming. It's insane in there. And I was like, well, you know, I'm gonna go jump in to see what the scarf did and see what happens. It drove people insane. Their favorite suspects were not part of the scarf and the DNA testing. So there was just, it depends on how passionate someone is about it. So yeah, I mean, would if there was DNA evidence and it 100% pointed to this is not real, but Lou, just because that's the first name that came up, people would there would be a contingent that rejected it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and that's the hard part is that I've seen a lot of that on the forum talking about the DNA evidence and like why are they not doing uh, genealogical testing on it, and why did they not put it in CODIS, or why did it not have a match in CODIS? And it's like I've got a pretty competent reason why, but it's like I don't want to get into battles with people over it.
Right.
I mean, it's called
And who's
the
going to pay for
DNA
it?
is mixed. There you go.
Oh,
And
I'm sure it is.
when
And in
DNA is mixed,
1995 DNA.
well, and it's been meant. I've even heard. I believe it was the Netflix documentary where one of the detectives, he didn't say mixed, but he said that he described where they were getting the DNA from, and if the DNA is mixed, you have to do one-to-one comparisons, which takes a lot of time.
And money.
Yeah, I mean, you're
Well, and
going all around the country,
w-
and I think people are looking for like that quick fix, partly because media has told them, oh, you know, anytime you have DNA, you just ship it off to Othram Labs, and they
So
run it in their system, and
that's a
boom,
very special problem. That's called the CSI effect.
right,
and
exactly.
and it's less news and more fiction. So it's a huge issue with juries when you
Yeah,
like jury selection, trying to convince them of things. And it's also they have and a lot of police training manuals too, going to the CSI effect, because there was a lot of recruits in the early 2000s into 2015, 2016 that just couldn't comprehend the amount of time it took to do something. Like, you don't. It's not like you're in Las Vegas and you ship it down the hall.
Right.
These are very specific and expensive things, and then the prices are also a thing. I helped on a couple of cold cases where DNA was the thing. We needed grants to get the DNA. You had to be thoroughly policed the entire case, and then you would apply for the grant and hope you got it, and the grant would pay for the lab. So it
Well,
worked.
and people casually throw around things like genetic, genealogies and things like that. But I don't think most people recognize that even in cases where that would be viable to perform, to say it's labor intensive. I was reading about a case the other day, and they were describing having to bring on teams of historians because they started in the 18th or 17th century and had to trace forward like a few hundred years at a time through cousins
Mhm.
and different things. And it's not going to be from this cousin's line, so we have to exclude that, and we have to look to this other area.
Right?
It was incredibly labor intensive, and I think most people imagine that you're sending this off to a lab and somehow it's creating a family tree from nothing.
Yeah, I've actually got a friend or former colleague that is working for the FBI just doing that. And he's a retired homicide detective and he's working I'll just say it, the Aisha degree case from North Carolina. And like Brian was saying, like, this is not a quick fix. It's taking, takes a long time. So,
And
but
that's also, an affectation of the internet too. Not everything is instantly Googleable. You
right.
just can't throw
Well,
it like, who killed Cameron Santana, and it's not going to pop up, of course.
Chat GPT, right? Like
Yeah, or we
that'll,
or we have these like websites like Ancestry and 23andMe, and people are used to the idea that, oh, you just pay $50 and send this thing off to a lab, and you start to see your tree develop each week. Someone else is doing that kind of labor for you, but it's a process that happens pretty quickly, and it's not really like that.
Yeah, it's absolutely different.
Yeah.
But that's again, our fiction. It's all fiction. Even real life tragedy is fiction. And that because it's the same medium, right? We're seeing it, and now we're breaking it up into TikToks and YouTubes, and it's getting even smaller and smaller and more concise. And so, the nuance of a case was lost on most people in the '90s, and now it's obliterated.
yeah. And when you bring up social media and even YouTube shows, everything is the way to be successful on YouTube and on social media is to be very quick and get right to the point and not explain the background. Like with YouTube, your first 30 seconds are literally, going to decide if people watch the show or not.
Right.
And so if you do it more from like a long form traditional background where you start from point A and go to point Z instead of starting at, point Y, it's not going to be as successful.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, like TikTok, Instagram, all these platforms encourage just very quick, um, salacious comments and
Right.
videos that just drive immediate views, and no one wants to know like
It's
the
the
back.
same model. Like the Geraldo show was the same model. I
Right.
guarantee they had a and I don't remember that very specifically, but as they came up to a commercial break, some salacious comment laid it out, and you're going to stick around because you're going to
Oh
see what's
yeah.
going to happen after that commercial break.
We're going to
And so,
reveal who is the father.
exactly, we're
I
going to
can
tell
still
you
remember
who
Jerry
abused
Springer.
JonBenét Ramsey.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
And it's we haven't changed. The medium's changed, and the amount of time we have to work with has been compromised. But that's still the same. And then we have this idea of giving everyone this illusion of a voice, and Gerbener tells us that they're never going to be involved with these types of tragedies for the most part. So now it's even more fiction. What happens to some other human being? Like, what, people in Phoenix? Phoenix is nowhere near me. Whatever happens there happens there. So and again, we're not going to chat. The AI is going to make it even worse. It's just going to make everything that much worse because now we don't even like AI does not create anything. Generative AI does not generate a thing. It's going to pick up it's going to search the internet super quick and find all the ideas they think is out there, and it's going to smash it together and give it to you. So when you type in who killed JonBenét Ramsey, it'll say no one's been convicted of this crime, but most people think it was this person. So they're going to say it's the parents because that's what AI does. It searches the internet and it gives them what they think the answer should be based on what's out there, and they shoot it out to you. So this is even going to further entrench people.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that the only, or that's one of the upsides of AI with these cases is and Brian and I have talked about this in the past, is that, these are the type of cases that have so much depth to them and are just so long for investigators to sit down and go page to page. You can dump them into programs and,
Oh yeah,
do searches for, a certain person's name to pop up to see if they came up in a Canvas search or an
right.
interview.
You can have the machine come up to a conclusion if you want, but that's absolutely different than the low grade consumer based AI that someone's going to ask a question in. That's
Right.
different. So like you're utilizing AI for the machine learning purpose of here is a ton of data, make sense of this data. That could be incredibly helpful and has been incredibly helpful in investigations.
Well, Brian, I think we can wrap this up. Do you have any final thoughts on the media and JonBenét, or do you want to go straight into plugging your stuff?
I think we've had enough JonBenét coverage for a lifetime. So
Oh gosh.
I am hoping that this will get wrapped up pretty soon. And if you want to hear about cases that have not been quite wrapped up or gotten the attention that they deserve, go to briansantanaauthor.com. There is a new book in the works. There are some other future articles that are coming your way. So sign up on my list to hear about what is going on.
All right. David, how can we support you? And I know you've been doing some stuff in film, right?
Oh yeah, I've done stuff in film for years. That doesn't have much to do with this stuff though. I'm just happy to help wherever I can. So if anyone is in need of criminal behavioralist or anything like this, everything is pro bono. I like to help families. Any organizations that need help with cold cases, I'm more than happy to take a look. You go to hayescriminology.com and get all the information there. Authors as well. If you would like case analyses, I'm again more than happy to help. And this is I teach, so mainly in prisons. So this is how I kind of want to give back. So I got my bills paid. Let's try and help some people.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, and you also helped Tony Wright with the Yuba County 5. I know you gave some insight on that, which we've covered on the show. And
Fascinating case.
Yes,
Great book,
fascinating case. People still message me about that, and
Have you seen those internet groups? They get they're as volatile as the.
Oh, we had about 60 of them on the show when we did the live show with Tony, and they were Tony at the end messaged me and he was like, "Hey, I've got to end this because it's been going on and on and on." And but I love that. I think we spent about 2 hours talking.
Oh, wow.
But hold on, we've got one more. Excellent analysis. This is a great show to explain the importance of media literacy. Yes. Thank you so much for that. Well,
thank you.
To wrap things up, if you'd like to support me, you can get a copy of A Murder on Campus, A Professor, the Cop, and North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case. That book was written with my brother, Brian Santana. I've put links to that book as well as a Lou and JonBenét book. If people want to pick that up, that's in the YouTube description. So hopefully you'll pick up a copy of that. Make sure you like and subscribe to Santana True Crime. You can also follow me on Instagram or social media at Santana True Crime. Gentlemen, thank you again and good night.
Thank you.
Right.